All right, I've been asked to talk to you about business metrics, key performance indicators, and I've thought about it a lot, and I think you should have some. Actually, I find KPIs are delicious, but I warn you, don't overindulge. Too many KPIs are problematic. I'm looking at you, Matt.
I thought so much.
Too many KPIs are problematic, but how many are enough? So, most of you know me. I have studied financials of hundreds of companies in this industry, and I've spent days and days, and I go through every line, and I try and create benchmarks and metrics and figure out numbers for everyone and what should be right. And then one thing I've learned is that none of these numbers matter if I don't actually understand how your business was designed to operate. So comparing one company to another is really kind of silly when you get right down to it. So in my presentation today, I'm not going to mention a single KPI in mathematical terms or accounting terms. Instead, I want to share something that's far more valuable than averages and medians. You see, in my studies, I have uncovered what I believe to be the one indicator of success for your businesses that you need to be tracking, that you need to be paying attention to. And this one thing explains every trend in your business, and it forecasts what your trajectory is going to be. And I'm going to reveal it in about 6 minutes. So key performance indicators. They measure what your company was designed to do, right? They look backwards at your business. But they're only actionable if you actually understand your business model. Let me give you an example. Which is more valuable? Which of these two companies is more valuable? A $10 million company that does 50% gross profit, or a $50 million company that does 10% gross profit? You're right, we don't know. We have no earthly idea which one of those companies is more valuable. So we don't have enough information, we don't know about their market, we don't know this or that. Gross profit performance is dependent on a whole bunch of things, a whole lot of KPIs. So one KPI like gross profit is somewhat useless to us. But of course, I've asked you the right question, but I asked you in completely the wrong way. Value of a business, when we're valuing a business, is all about future earnings. What's happened in the past doesn't really matter unless it can predict the future. So what we're interested in is the future earnings of a business. So how is it possible to know whether your business is working well? Could it be working better? I don't know. Probably. How? I can't answer that. We need a lot of KPIs to understand what's going on. And every KPI tells us a little bit of something, but it doesn't tell us the whole picture. You know, if your gross profit is down, which KPIs contributed to that? And what do we do about it, and when did we know about it? How did we see it coming? Did we see it coming? And if we saw it coming, why didn't we do something about it? So let's think for a moment. What's on your CEO dashboard? What do you put on there? Revenue? That's good. Gross profit percentages? Great. What about something like cost of customer acquisition? That'd be interesting. But if we use that, what else do we have to know? Well, we need to know the value of a customer, right? Sure. We would need to know the cost of customer retention. That would matter. There's a whole lot of other things that we would need to know to make that one metric more useful. But what if you have the wrong customers? What if you're chasing the wrong business? Then what difference does it make what your cost of customer acquisition is? And that's the problem with KPIs. So the question I have is, what would predict the impact of poor decisions? Predict it instead of finding it after it happened. So they say we improve the things that we measure, right? We measure things because then we will improve it because we're thinking about it. Great. And we know we can't change the past. So when we unknowingly create negative impact on our business, how are we going to find out about it? You know, it's first reflected in a metric that's way, way down the stream. We'll call it a grandchild metric. And then there's a parent metric and a grandparent metric, and we finally get up to the master metric, whatever that metric might be. So a lot of KPIs can help us understand the KPIs that they feed into. And what we learn to do then is we learn to optimize metrics instead of just reduce or increase them. And if we're doing everything correctly, then we should have one ultimate indicator, and that would probably be profit, right? Profit is the one metric to rule them all. Sounds great. It's not the thing I'm looking for. What we need is a measurement that predicts the future success or failure of your business. So, let me ask you a couple of questions. Well, tell you what if I told you, if I'm looking at your business, that your revenue to full-time equivalent employee is too high? What looks like efficiency in the way that you're running a business is actually inefficiency disguised. What if I said your close rate is too high? Can you imagine a close rate being too high, Mike? How can that possibly be? Sure, you're going in there, you gotta have every single job, you sell everything on price, you close everything. What would tell me that your seemingly good metrics might be bad indications? You know, your overtime is too low, by the way, right? What else are we doing wrong? Your receivables are too high, your payables are too low. How can we counterintuitively understand these things? Reducing a symptom doesn't necessarily address the problem. So I told you I would reveal the one thing. And this one thing explains every result and every trend in your business. And if you can only measure one thing, measure fear. Measure fear. When fear goes up, we have a fight or flight syndrome. We have a visceral reaction when we have fear. When fear goes down, we move without consideration. We just blindly walk down streets. The only measure in business that ultimately matters is to what extent fear influences your decisions. To what extent does fear influence your decisions? And once you dissect any key performance indicator, your close rates, your receivables, your overtime, you can reduce it to its fear element. We have too much overtime because we're afraid of adding employees. We have too little overtime because we're afraid of variable costs. It's just fear. Now, a little fear is healthy. No fear is irrational. And too much fear indicates a lack of knowledge. And therefore, fear of knowledge is an existential threat to your business. A KPI that does not trigger action is useless, but a KPI that triggers endless action is very unhealthy. So, we know you can't reduce the cost of customer acquisition to zero, can we? No. So what's the point of measuring it at all? Because it generates good questions, right? It triggers good questions, like what's the optimal investment in a new business that yields the highest return? That's a great question. We're never going to know the answer, never. But healthy fears tells us that we have to keep asking the questions so that we can better understand it and make better decisions. When we're afraid to ask, fear has won. When we do not trust the answer, fear is now in charge. Remember, being afraid to stop is as bad as being afraid to begin. So the thought I want to leave you with is that questions asked and answered increase knowledge while reducing fear, which optimizes results. And as soon as I wrote this down, I immediately modified it because I'm an operations guy and that's what I do. We're going to operationalize this. Good questions, asked and answered well, increase applied knowledge while reducing unhealthy fear. So, when you wake up every morning, acknowledge your fears. Okay? As you go through the day, assess the impact of fear on the decisions that you're making. When fear is winning, acquire knowledge until fear is healthy again. And then at night, when you go to sleep, know you did something that will have a significant impact on your future earnings. Success is a journey, right? You cannot change where you've been, but you can decide where you're going. Thank you for listening. Now, I would like to introduce my good friend and Director of Business Development for Rentex, Janae Mummert.
Thank you. You're passing the baton. Awesome. Hey, they're starting me with 0. Does that mean I'm finished? Thanks, it's really great to be here. You probably are wondering why Rentex would possibly get up here and talk to you about in-house versus independent providers, and I think the answer to that is because we're neither. So we work with everybody, we're kind of neutral, and we do get to hear both sides complain about the other on a pretty regular basis, so hopefully we can provide a little bit of insight. Is anybody other than John LaPosa actually an in-house provider here? All right, so I do know who I'm talking to. So we think that the answer is not all in-house and all independent provider, that the happiness is somewhere in the middle. And I kind of am like that adventure racer where they went and knocked on the door and they got the guy, had never done it before, but what he brought to the table was local knowledge. That's what your in-house providers do too. So I thought that was kind of a good tie into this. So the reality is both sides are going to do everything that you can to sell against the other. So you guys are going to go in and you're going to say, and no offense to my friends back there at the PSAV table, but you're going to go in and say, they don't know what they're doing, they're expensive, right? And they're going to say, well, we know the building and we know the location and we have gear on site. So you guys are going to sell against each other at 100% flat out. That's what you're expected to do. I think really the happy medium there is that you guys need to work together, and there's a way to do it. And the bottom line is neither's going away. In-house isn't going away, and certainly all of you all aren't going away. All right, the pros and cons. Their shared revenue model means higher pricing, right? Which means we're saying they're greedy. We don't like those guys. You want to know who you really need to be looking at for that greed is actually the hotel chains, right? So instead of saying, the PSAVs and Encores of the world are the ones that are really jacking the prices up, it's honestly the pressure from the hotel chains, asking them for higher and higher commission rates. So, if you want to kind of get angry at somebody, maybe you're looking at the wrong directions. The one thing that you do have, again, like our local racer and the adventure team, is that they know the venue, they know what's going on there, they know the back hallways, they know everything. So instead of fighting that, take advantage of it, but take advantage of it in a way that's going to meet your customers' needs, still keep your customers in your camp and make a good experience for everybody. All right, exclusive services. We all know the bad and the ugly. There is a little good to it. Again, this is being driven by the hotel chains. All right, you can make a little bit of a good use out of it by perhaps, let's say, rigging, all right? Everybody's got exclusive in-house rigging, so make friends with these guys. Be nice. Perhaps you can get them to rig a whole day early for you if the room's empty. Take advantage of this stuff. Kind of embrace your in-house providers and understand that, they do know the building. They can take on some of the extra liability. And the bottom line is they're there, they're doing it. You can't really fight it. So, my mom used to say you get more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar, so maybe that's the way you need to treat your in-house providers when you're working with them as well. But don't be afraid to ask, and also coach your clients. Coach your clients that a lot of this stuff they can negotiate when they're talking to the hotel in the beginning, because what do the hotels care about more than anything? Do they care about AV? Not really. You know what they care about is heads and beds. And if they think they're going to lose heads and beds, they are very, very likely to give in on some of these things that might be a little more expensive and might save your clients some money. So it's kind of up to you as their knowledge base, as their provider, to coach them on what maybe they can help work out in the very, very beginning, maybe before they met with you, but hopefully not too far into the process. All right, when do you want to utilize them? I think, smaller sessions, that'd be a good time to utilize some of your in-house providers. Breakouts, cocktail parties, breakfasts, the stuff that your guys are probably overqualified to do anyway. You don't need to fly them in to do that. Take advantage of them for that. Throw a little bit of business their way. Sometimes that'll go a long way with getting you help when something does go down, when you need something in a hurry. I know everybody back there at PSAV is shaking their head like, yeah, give us a little bit of business. So, throw a little bit of business their way, make friends, have a good relationship, communicate with them from the beginning. Blocking them out, shutting them out, pretending like the in-house provider doesn't exist is not going to do anybody any good. Your client will be the one that suffers. You'll be the one that suffers. So you really need to embrace them. And again, do it smart. Do it in a way that's going to be good for your client. Labor to monitor breakout rooms, to me, is the very best thing that you can use your in-house provider for. And for one reason and one reason only, is at that point on those little breakout rooms, most of the questions they're asking have nothing to do with AV. They have to do with where's the bathroom, where can I make a copy, which way is the elevator, where's the valet parking. Those are all things that your guys who have never been in that hotel before are not the experts at answering, but the people who work there every day are. So that's a really great thing that you can do, and it's actually going to benefit your customer. They'll have a better experience because the people that are answering those questions really know how to answer them. And again, you're throwing some business to the way of the in-house provider. Kind of makes that whole relationship a little less adversarial. Also cuts down on your travel expenses, and your guys can go do the bigger, more labor-intensive and more technical stuff. All right, but this is your client, all right? You don't have to give up your client. You should never act like you're giving up your client to the in-house. You need to manage them, but partnering and keeping this relationship not adversarial is going to be the best thing that you can do to keep your client and keep them happy. Leverage the resources, communicate. The bottom line is they're there. You can either fight them or you can work with them. And honestly, as somebody from the outside who really has no strong tie to either one, the best thing to do is work with them in a really smart way that makes sense for you and your client. But the bottom line is peacefully coexist, communicate early and often, and a partner relationship is always preferable to an adversary relationship. And if I had to actually do this in one slide, there would just be one slide that says be nice. Just be nice to them. Communicate, be nice, take care of your customer, do what's good for them, and you can actually figure out a way to work with these evil in-house providers because they're really not evil. Everybody there that you're working with is just trying to do their job and not have their boss yell at them that day anyway. So be nice, work with them, and try to do it smart. And that's all I've got. But I do get to introduce my former coworker and also good friend, True Rickers, who's the Executive Vice President of Evolve Media Group. So, True?
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is my first AVEC conference, so it's been nice to see some old friends and network and kind of get to know some of the people that I haven't met before, especially on the integration side of the business, because I have been on the rental side of the business and the live event business since I started in 1991, but I do enjoy other parts as well. So today I've been asked to talk about whether to rent or to buy, and CapEx is always sort of a subjective topic and one that there's never a one-size-fits-all or the exact recipe that will work for different companies. And our company is unique in the fact that we actually do sell video equipment as well as rent video equipment. And when you're in the equipment rental side of the business, it seems a bit taboo to sell your clients' equipment because if they own more, in theory, they're going to rent less. We take a different tact. We create deeper partnerships with people, and we feel if they have the appetite to buy equipment and they have money to spend on their CapEx budget, they're going to find the equipment somewhere, and we figure we might as well partner with them and use that to enhance our rental business when they need to supplement, and then we also offer an education arm, and we've had good success tying the three business segments together. But like I said, there's key factors to consider, and what I'm talking about today would apply to your small to mid-sized rental and staging company, not so much companies that are developing content or being a puppeteer over different vendors, but guys that have a warehouse, guys that have trucks, they've got technicians, they probably sell or they probably rent and support events with different domains of equipment. They've got some lighting, they've got some audio, they've got some video, spread throughout the geography of the United States. So that's kind of the target audience that I would be talking to about CapEx and whether it makes more sense to rent or to buy. So again, full service rental and staging providers are what I'm talking about today. The size of the company and the CapEx budget obviously plays a big factor in this. If you've got a small CapEx budget, you don't really want to go out and spend it on high-end audio consoles that are going to cost you in excess of 6 figures. But if you are a bigger company and you've got more CapEx to work with, obviously you can play with more expensive toys. Geography plays a big part. If I'm running a rental staging company in Wichita, Kansas, I'm going to want to increase my resources to have on-hand equipment, and I'm going to want to be best friends with other people in my market, knowing that I don't have a lot of resources to sub-rent at the local level, and I don't want to impact my business with a lot of freight and shipping costs. So geography is going to be a different factor, whether you're in a smaller market or whether you're in a large market with a lot of resources and a lot of available equipment. And then again, your business model. Are you more organizing and helping? Are you more managing content and acting more like a production company? Or are you a true rental staging house that's renting equipment, renting technicians. So. And then the revenue pipeline's big as well. If you've got a good forecast, you've got good booked business, you've got signed contracts for the next year, obviously you would be more inclined to buy more equipment than rent. So your revenue pipeline is important as you assess your decisions. So let's start with the easy stuff to buy. You've got equipment that you see on every RFP, every proposal. It's got a very high utilization rate. You want to buy those things because you don't want to cross-rent stuff constantly over and over and over again. It becomes a cost burden on your balance sheet. Steady demand, which creates high utilization, is a no-brainer. Easy to maintain. Think of smaller items that don't require a specific engineering talent to maintain or QC them. Maintain can also mean store them, easy to store, easy to manage, keep updated, if you will, or keep in good condition. Maintain's kind of a catch-all, and then obviously low chance of obsolescence. Obsolescence is our fear in the AV industry. If we need a good life cycle on the rental side to make a product worthwhile to own and to rent. When I look at products of this criteria, microphones are a no-brainer. Any of us in this room that haven't paid for an SM58 microphone 25 times over, we're doing something wrong. UHF microphones, the same thing. They're just constantly, they're on every show. Makes a lot of sense to own those as opposed to subrent those. Screens, I'm a big advocate for owning screens, especially small, medium-sized screens. Big screens you could debate, but small, medium-sized screens, you're going to have them on every show. Why not own them? Why not maintain them and keep them to your company standards and not be so reliant on sub-rentals? Powered speakers, every AV rental company should have a good arsenal of powered speakers. They're money makers, tried and true, easy ROI. Small projectors, prices come way down on those. You can get a nice tabletop projector for $3,000 or $4,000. ROI is still good on those. You should probably buy those. Everybody still uses pipe and drape in the industry. No-brainer. Technicians hate it. Good money maker, good ROI. If you got drapery, you got to have uplighting. You got to make the drape look good. So uplighting and other things, good investment, good use of your money. So I think those are pretty obvious. I don't think anybody would dispute that. It's on the rental side of the business. And monitors, you could maybe debate. They get obsolete a little bit. They get cool, but they get kind of hot or get kind of cold. But I'm an advocate for owning monitors as well. Good money makers. Stuff that you might not want to own because it's got a burden attached to it, and that can be a cost burden. That can be a technician need or a human resources need. These are items that you have a sporadic demand. If you only need it 2 or 3 times a year, I'm not going to recommend you buy that and just stockpile equipment that you don't rent on a regular basis. Low utilization is connected to sporadic demand. Debatable ROI. Some of the more expensive stuff to purchase rents for a higher price to start, but that declines as more people own it and the bigger wholesalers buy more, and then the price tends to come down over the life cycle of the asset. High purchase price. These items are very expensive, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then the available human resources to maintain. Do you have qualified technicians to maintain and keep this high-end expensive gear up to date and in good rentable condition, and that's tough. It's hard to cross-train people on very high-end gear. So items that fit into this category would be media servers. It can be in excess of $100,000, very skilled person required to maintain them and to QC them and to operate them and provide tech support. Probably a better thing to sub-rent than to own unless you really are in the high-end game and use them on a day-to-day basis. Large audio or lighting consoles, incredibly expensive, incredibly specialized. Again, if you're using these 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, sub-rent, they're around, they're not cheap, but you can get the expertise along with them if you play the right angles. Creative scenic, creative lighting, again, your customers aren't going to look at the lighting fixtures in a room. They're not going to go up and look at the truss and see what's up there. They're going to look at what the stage looks like. You can accomplish a lot of things with very basic lighting to this day. So that I would say sub-rent if you only need it a few times a year. High lumen projectors, prices have come down. Laser projectors have made them easier to maintain. But again, you get into that 20K, 30K range. Are you going to need them day in and day out, or are you better off spending your money on 12K and 10K? I say there's enough large venue projectors out there in the rental market that you should maybe sub-rent those. Maybe own 4, maybe own 6, but don't go too top-heavy on those just to support your largest event. They always say you don't build the church for Easter Sunday, and I think as you look at CapEx and budget, that's a good lesson to live by. Large PA, again, are you really getting a lot of value for that buck? Your clients aren't really looking at the PA. They're hearing it. If it sounds good, they don't care what brand it is. And then LED, debatable topic. I know more people that have gotten into the LED game that regret it a year or 2 in, but the price has just plummeted so much that it's hard not to at least consider owning LED if you're a rental staging client. It's gotten easier. The software, the processors have become easier. So LED is one that I see more and more rental staging companies jump into, although it is readily available on the sub-rental market. So to summarize, I would say, spend your CapEx gradually. We get very busy this time of the year. A lot of people are spending CapEx in December to clear what they've got budgeted for the calendar year. And then in January, we see another big pop because people want to start the year right with a new budget and they want to spend their CapEx money. It's always good to have a slush fund. A good friend of mine runs a company in LA. They strolled upon some auto business late in the year. It's a 6-week tour. They had to buy projectors and screens for it, and they had money put aside that they kind of were going to either roll into next year or use as a slush fund. He was very glad he had some. He keeps 25% kind of put aside and not in his regular CapEx rotation. I believe in cycle buying. If you need 30 items of something, if you need 30 or 40 tabletop projectors, I like buying 10 every 2 months as opposed to buying them all at once. Then they all don't fail at the same time, and you've got kind of a fresh churn to your inventory, so you've always got new equipment coming in as you phase out older assets. So I believe in cycle buying for most rental staging companies. And then I recommend we do stuff like this. I think being connected to your peers in the industry, talking about real world wins, real world losses, these are important things. So I believe in collaboration and utilizing the resources of the people that come to conferences like this. Tom's got a great group with the Jumpstart workshops. Obviously, Infocom, LDI, these events are great places to network. But, we recommend people put their money into the equipment that's at eye level that your clients see. Packaging, casing, cool kitting, this is what gets companies a lot of value from the production community and meeting planning community. So I say, don't spend your money on stuff that's going to be behind the scenes. Spend your stuff on money that your clients are going to see and appreciate. Ease of use and efficiency is key in all things. So that's all I've got to say about that. I'd be glad to sidebar with anybody afterwards or tonight at the networking events. I love talking about this stuff, and I enjoy seeing people that I haven't seen in a long time. So thank you, and now I will introduce Anthony Vade with FMAV to talk about experiential selling.
Thank you. Thank you, True. How can you not trust a man with the name True? Brilliant. I rehearsed this yesterday. I nailed my 8 minutes, so that's a bad sign because early success doesn't necessarily dictate future success, but I will try. I will not give you all the answers or all the ways that you can deploy experience-based selling within your businesses. I hope this starts as a conversation starter for you, some inspiration, and perhaps a call to action for what I believe we need to do in the future. I'm going to make some assumptions throughout this. The first assumption being that as leaders in this industry, you've all heard of the progression of economic value as theorized or as articulated by Joe Pine and James Gilmore in the experience economy 30 years ago. Feeling old? But the idea being that as our offerings, as we progress up and we apply customization to our offerings, the value of those offerings go up. Now, some in the venue and hotel and tourism industry argue with us a bit, and they say that experience is part of everything from goods and onwards. I believe it's some sort of hybrid between the two, and I feel that the progression of economic value, as it's stated in the experience economy, is very applicable to what we do in live event space. So I'm happy to jump on board to the extent that I went to Venice to go to Cafe Florian, buy that $16 or $20 US coffee, and it was an exceptional experience. Now, whether there was 3 of us, so whether the 2 cappuccinos, the double espresso, and the club sandwich was worth the 60 US and the €6 per head just to have the experience of listening to the band that was playing, whether that was worth the value, we can all debate that, but it certainly was an experience, a transformational moment that will not be easily replicated again in my life. So why is this such a big topic? Why does the industry keep talking about experience, right? You're hearing MPI, PCMA, ILEA, everybody's experience, experience, experience. And why is this fight against commoditization? To understand that, we need to look at a couple of other theories that are out there and come to terms with one very important thing, and that's that the AV industry is already commoditized. Anytime you're providing line item pricing, anytime you're providing a quote, even I argue, or responding to an RFP, you are buying into this. You are buying into your products and services, your goods, your offerings, being a commodity that is compared to everybody else in your market. And I want to bring in another little theory that's out there, which is the innovation life cycle. Now, I believe live events are a constantly evolving prototype, constantly innovating, because what we do is never the same day in, day out. Maybe slightly more so for the in-house team, but for the majority of us, we're reinventing something every time we put on a live event. So we're going through this cycle a lot. And this is applied a lot to technology now, but Why it's become such a hot issue is because we're seeing associations, planners, and our clients are now reached a stage of capitulation, in my opinion. The digital media has created online communities, online training platforms, a lot of their bread and butter parts, and they're getting the squeeze now. And of course, that's trickling down to us, and they're squeezing us harder. And the reason I think we can recognize that we are being commoditized and squeezed for our value is because, we're there at the consolidation stage. I don't think anybody can deny, and present company very much included, that our industry is consolidating at a rapid rate, and everything that goes into that, sort of is then being affected by our customers feeling that squeeze as well. So that can then compound upon that, and we need to address this now. We can't wait for them to stabilize or start to consolidate themselves. We have this opportunity in front of us, and really it's a necessity for us to address this. And if this is truly a cycle and it's going to come back around, how do we get to that next innovation stage? Are we going to, like the hotels and venues and Airbnb, is there going to be one disruptor that comes in and forces us all to then be an early mover? Or do we have an opportunity as an industry to band together and create our own innovation? So I'm going to put forward a few things in my last half here and talk a bit about where this struggle is now in this squeeze moment that our planners are in and in our post-squeeze phase. And part of the things that are really sabotaging us from moving forward moving into that innovation stage. And it comes down to this, let's say it's an honorable intention by the planners out there in the world, comparing apples to apples, leveling the playing field, make sure all the AV companies are. I think that's the fastest way to mediocrity, and I think we need to address that. But the biggest problem I see with the apples to apples line item against line item is they're now coming to us in that innovation cycle, and they're not asking for the apple anymore. They're asking for the apple pie, fully baked, ready to go, with very little information. I give the example. I had a big rant on LinkedIn that went crazy viral, which was exciting. But they're coming to us asking us for, how can we innovate and wow, and how can we, but by the way, as part of the RFP process, we can't talk about this until we pick the supplier. So we're rolling the dice on what that wow means. And we're getting really excited. We're going, oh yeah, wow, I've got tons of wow for you clients. I've got all these great ideas. Let me pitch 7 stage set designs and this interactive technology, because I really need this win. There's this air of desperation to us in this commoditized market that we're running to appease them. And I think we need to break that cycle if we're going to band together as an industry and reinvigorate that innovation in the way that we engage with our customers. So we have these two ways of doing business: the transactional, commoditized, line item against line item. I believe they're pushing us in ways that they shouldn't. They're asking us for extra things when in essence, they should be providing a shopping list. We should be filling that list if they want to be truly transactional, and they should measure their own success of their own shopping list. Or we can take the experience angle, which I think we all need to evolve towards. And I don't like the pie in this case. I think it's more like this. It's getting together in a kitchen, co-creating, baking together, learning each other's needs, desires. And I think what we need to do is they need to engage us in a different way as part of a design team that co-creates, and then we share the measures of success through that experience. And most importantly, we charge them for the experience of the co-creation. We don't give it away as a value add, as a additional service offering free of charge. So I'll give you a couple of choices that we can make as an industry and as individual companies. We can be the commoditized apple. We can hand out our crates and be as cheap as we can be. That's the only way we're going to win. Build in your efficiencies and whatever else you need to do to make that happen. We can continue on the path we're at, where we're baking pies for our customers, and they're dictating the power dynamics, they're dictating the rules of engagement and all those elements, and that's going to be pretty messy for us, really. That's going to be hard to weather as well, and we're going to head back towards that crate. We can, at the very least, I believe we should, build this co-creation experience base, charging our clients for the experience of designing the event with them. But what FMAV's been working on for the last 3 years, and we've had some pretty good success, and I'm happy to chat about it at the panel and afterwards, is can we create the transformational experience for those customers? Can we empower them to learn how to communicate with us better? Can we empower them to work out how we engage and co-create so that they become stronger through that? Can we charge them for the experience of learning how to be better planners as it relates to the audiovisual? And can, through that, can we create our own efficiencies so that when that innovation curve comes back in and we start to get squeezed again, we have more efficiencies to help us weather that price-orientated element so we can kick into the other curve. What we can't have in the last 15 seconds is this. We can't have the planners, as they are now, holding the apple in one hand and the apple pie in the other and going, why are these pies priced so differently? Why am I paying more for one? Or there's this imbalance that they're not learning. So by us educating them, empowering them to understand what we do, why we do it, and how we co-create together, we have that opportunity to, it's been said multiple times already the last 2 days, I got really excited with the analogy, but all ships do rise on a high tide. So if we can elevate ourselves within our industry, stop fighting and pointing the fingers against each other, and we can help our clients not point the finger at them now to be the enemy either, that's squeezing us, raise them up as well, then hopefully we can weather that and kick ourselves into a new way of engaging with our industry, bring more business to us, and eventually build in efficiencies that help us be more profitable in the long term. Only slightly over.
Pretty good.
Okay. And with that, I'm going to introduce Chantel Cheatham, partner of Thompson Co. Cousins and Irons, to talk with us about employment law, hey?
Hey.
Whew.
Thank you. I am happy to be here. I am happier that you are here. At our firm, I represent management, employers, and all sorts of employment issues. And my favorite thing is to talk to my clients about the topic or the issue before it evolves into a demand letter or litigation. And so you're doing the perfect thing in coming and listening to this topic today. We're talking about independent contractor classifications, and I don't know if many of you have considered this already, but given your relationships with your clients, a lot of time you are standing in the role as an independent contractor. You are hired to provide a service, materials, expertise, and at the end of the year, if you receive a 1099 for the work that you did. And this is important because as you don't need to see that. In managing how you have individuals do work for you, if they're going to be an employee or an independent contractor, it's going to be determined based on why that analysis is being conducted. On the one hand, you have an IRS test, and it's going to be used if there's an issue with whether or not you're paying employment taxes. If there's not enough in the coffers coming from the business, and maybe somebody's made a complaint to the Department of Labor saying, they pay me, they 1099 me, I don't get overtime, I'm not getting minimum wage, I've filed a state wage claim. Well, IRS gets wind of it, there might be an audit. The other issue that comes up is Fair Labor Standards Act. And that's going to be an individual who's been doing work for you. They're claiming, again, that they haven't gotten their minimum wage, federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, or they've worked really long projects for you. They've worked in excess of 40 hours a week. They're not getting their overtime pay. Sometimes that goes unnoticed. They don't care until maybe there's a separation of the relationship. And that individual, maybe in their minds thinking that they've been an employee because they've had a relationship with you for months, sometimes even years, will file an unemployment claim. And the response to that unemployment claim is, no, wait. That person's not my employee. And you haven't put in to the unemployment coffers those benefits for them to actually collect on that. So then that person oftentimes will find their plaintiff's attorney, who will send you a demand letter to say, I represent individual X, who was misclassified as an independent contractor. Sometimes we'll say, worked for you for more than a decade. You terminated them unjustly. And, oh, by the way, over that entire time that they worked for you, you failed to pay them overtime. And your work is so demanding that they were working nights, weekends, in excess of 40 hours a week regularly. And when you have an individual who is an independent contractor, you don't have a duty to record their time. You are not doing a check-in, check-out. You have no idea how many hours they've worked per week. And under the Fair Labor Standards Act, there is a requirement that you record the hours that your employee works. Certainly important when you have non-exempt employees. Another issue, there's a lot to talk about, and I only have 8 minutes. But I'm happy to talk about these issues with you and how they extend to other things after the speech or during the panel. But the problem then is they're going to file a claim or file a lawsuit, 3-year statute of limitations, saying, now I want back pay for all of those hours that I worked, all that overtime I didn't get, and they're entitled to liquidated damages if they can prove that they were actually an employee, not an independent contractor, and that they did indeed work overtime. And if you did not keep records, as often you don't, I will say I do have a case now where I represent a strip club, and there's a dancer claiming that she was misclassified as an independent contractor. And because we have to know when she's reporting to work and announce when she's there and know when she's no longer there, that is the rare case that a company will know that somebody who they've identified as an independent contractor actually worked. Another reason this comes up, and this is very popular now during this #MeToo movement, and I know it's not something that you're expecting to discuss here today, but claims of discrimination, especially sexual harassment. There is so much discussion now over, after Harvey Weinstein, whether or not people have been harassed. There's been a power imbalance. If an invitation to dinner was inappropriate in violation of Title VII, discrimination based on sex or a hostile work environment. Those laws do not apply to independent contractors. They apply to employees. And so if an individual is saying that they were touched inappropriately, asked out on dates, harassed, were subject to a hostile environment, and that's only one example. Of course, all these employment statutes, whether they're related to discrimination, family leave, all of that is employee-driven. But in this context, someone will say, I want to file a claim. I quit my job, and I did it because so-and-so came on to me. Again, the response is, wait, you're not my employee. You're not entitled to that protection. A lot of times you'll see that where somebody has filed a charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. The EEOC does not have the ability to determine whether or not somebody is properly classified. That'll often get escalated then to a lawsuit because the parties won't be able to resolve it at that stage. Beware, because even if somebody is an independent contractor and they're not entitled to the protection under these laws, to the extent that they interact with your employees, you are still required to protect your employees from independent contractors. The easiest way to distinguish an independent contractor from an employee, and it's very broad, is that an independent contractor is hired to get a job done. You are controlling the result, but not the means and manner in which they accomplish it. And so that's why I liken a lot of your businesses to independent contractor relationships with your clients. Your client may say, I have an event on X date. This is what I need done. It is up to you to bring in the materials that they need to get that accomplished. A lot of times your client won't even know what they need until you tell them. Versus an employee. There is an ability to control employees, micromanage them down to the detail. And if you want control over an individual, if you want them to arrive to work at a certain time, if you're demanding that they work a certain number of hours, if you're demanding that they follow a certain policy, if you've provided them copies of your employee handbook and you dictate how they dress, how they wear their hair, how they interact, often you're going to have, more often than not, you are going to have an employee. Mention the IRS test. The IRS has 20 factors that they look at, and they're broken up into 3 categories. One is behavioral control, the other is financial control, and then you have the relationship of the parties. Behavioral control is going to be, as I mentioned, how the individual does their job. Financial control is going to boil down to how the individual finances their business. And then the relationship of the parties is how long really that they've been involved and if there's a document. And I've already gone over my time because there's so much to discuss. But I will say the factors are in your materials. And they are similar depending on whether or not you have a test related to the FLSA or to Title VII. And they're always going to come down to control, economic realities. And then I'm sure I've raised a number of questions, and some of you might even have concerns as to the relationships you have with people that you've contracted as an independent contractor. So I'm happy to answer those during the panel, which will be moderated by Andrew Brode. He is the president of AV Chicago.
Thank you. You can stay up.
You might as well.
We'll bring everybody back up. Everybody can climb up to these stools. I'm going to encourage all of you. I know there's a lot of questions. I know I have a lot as a business owner to the topics that have come up here. Don't wait till after to ask those questions. Ask them now because you may spark some conversation or spark some other people's ideas. I know we're all doing this. We all have a lot of questions about it. None of these topics were heavy at all. I will start in the audience. Is there anybody that had some initial questions to kick us off? Right down here. Go ahead.
It was interesting listening to True and talking about buy or rent, which I think is always a major factor in running any business. I can give my view on Europe. I'm based, you may notice from the accent when I come from here. Leasing. Banks can't give money away at the moment. They're trying to get new ways to actually get rid of their money, to get businesses involved. And leasing is becoming a big factor in the AV business. It's starting to become big. Is that in the rental sector? You know, rather than buy or rent, is leasing becoming a factor in that?
We have seen that of recent, and I personally get emails constantly from people saying, hey, would you guys like a line of credit? You know, there is a lot of cash available right now for companies, and we've got companies that we partner with to stretch out payments. It's more of a financing agreement as opposed to a lease. I think sometimes the language gets a little tricky on what is technically a lease. I view leasing like you would lease a car, that at the end of the life cycle of the lease, you have to give the car back or the assets back. More of what we see is people stretching out their spend over a year or 2 years or 3 years based on their credit, and then stretching out those payments as well with a finance fee attached. But the fees have become very low. If you've got good credit, sometimes you can finance $250,000 at 3 to 4%, you know, which is palatable for most people. If you got bad credit, it gets in that 9% range, it becomes less appealing. But we are seeing that more and more, and they are hard assets. You can keep track of them. So these companies that provide the funds are more willing to do it than they used to be. We're in a good economy.
Let's follow up on that too, though. Does that change, you know, you gave your red light, green light. Does that change the way when you're looking at financing and the way that a company should acquire? Obviously, there's a financial way of looking at it, but overall, when you're adding gear to your inventory?
I think the higher the price point of the acquisition of assets, the more likely you would take advantage of a lease environment. You know, we don't see a lot of people that want to lease or want to stretch out financing on a $12,000 purchase. Right. You get into that $200,000 or $300,000 range, and most people would take advantage of a long-term payment plan for something like that.
So LED wall, right?
Absolutely.
Justin.
Yeah, so on that same topic, whenever you're making a major purchase, say that $200,000 or $300,000, and you're going to finance it over 2 or 3 years, do you recommend looking at that as a single year hit against your CapEx budget, or spreading it over the 3?
Well, that's a great question.
Because it's a cash question versus a. You know.
Yeah, I personally would probably spread it out, you know, just to have a little less burden on my balance sheet. But that is a great question, and I've never really been in the accounting or, you know, finance side of our business, so I might defer that to people more involved in banking and what general accounting practices are acceptable in our industry. Tom
Yeah, I
might
was
be a
going to
good
say,
resource
Tom,
on
you
it.
probably have something to say about that.
No, I got nothing.
You don't talk to anybody about that. Yeah. We know that's a lie.
No, but he said the right thing. It's a finance decision. You know, at the end of the day, it's a finance decision. How do you get your money? And I think a lot of people go to leasing because they're afraid to actually go to a bank and present a business case, when the fact of the matter, the lending decision is almost identical. So if you have a good banking relationship, you're going to get money. So, you know, a lease is just a leveraged loan.
Yeah.
So it's really how much can you absorb, and then how do you apply it? That's a tax question. That's not actually a finance question. That's a tax question.
And we're not getting into, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to throw one extra thought. On the lease side, though, you know, disposal of equipment these days is getting more complex. On the lease side, you can just say, hey, you need to take that back now. We don't have to worry about it anymore, right? So like projectors, you know, after 3 years, you need to replace them pretty much, right? So.
Which brings up a question to that, to stay on the equipment topic too. You know, I know in our company we're not good about it. We'll run the equipment into the ground, but selling it off pre-end of life, what are your thoughts on doing that, or is it just running into the ground?
You know, I think very few people in our industry have found the right life cycle management technique to really monitor an asset through its high point and then sell it off when and there are means to do that. But I talk to a lot of people in the industry, and more people are like you. They stockpile, they keep old stuff, they don't move it to South America or to churches and schools when it has value left at the right time. And you can talk to Janae, I'm sure Rentec still gets calls for 3/4-inch pneumatic decks occasionally. I mean, there is some value in keeping those old chestnuts in the inventory, but yeah, I think it's a common dilemma in our industry is that people don't sell or move equipment out at the exact right time. They tend to work
Those
work until the
slideshow
end.
projectors we have in our
Yep,
warehouse are a
that's
good
right,
example
that's
of
right.
that.
Yep, I
What
think
are you
that's-
seeing though, Janae, when you're working with clients? Obviously, you're on the sub-rental side.
We like to, our gear gets used a lot. So I think we're probably not quite in the same boat as the independent, producers and rental and staging companies where your stuff isn't busy and literally on a truck or on a show every day. I mean, our stuff really is. So in our particular case, we really do wear the gear out, sometimes even sooner than we would like to. For our customers, though, I do think that there's a lot of value to keeping what you do capitalized, keeping it fresh, keeping it new. There's a huge cost to keeping those old slide projectors, believe it or not. Real estate is not free. Neither is shelving, neither are the people that have to move it around to get to the stuff behind it. So I think in our case, yes, we really do wear our stuff out, but I do think that everybody else should probably have a good plan to manage that life cycle a little bit better because there's a real cost to it, even though you don't see it necessarily. It's not a big red flag, but it's there.
So that brings Anthony into the question here. So, I get an RFP, here's the list of equipment I need to have, specific gear model, somebody who doesn't even know what the gear does is asking for model numbers. What impact have you seen within your organization when you start moving away from, the commoditized proposal process to, delivering solutions?
And it's been a balancing act at this stage. It's a matter of understanding what that customer type is and asking the question, why are you asking for such detail? Is there a reason? And a lot of the time, we're finding that the reason is just one of trust. I need to know exactly what you got because AV companies rip me off. And we've put ourselves in that position of mistrust within our market, and that's another reason why we need to look at transformation, because we need to change our image within the market. And for the most part, I have clients who haven't seen a line item or even a quote. They've given me their budget for the last 4 or 5 years, and we've given them the show. Like, they maybe gotten a seating plan. They haven't even got the full pre-visualizations and complex diagram. They don't care, because they trust that what we're going to give them is what they're looking to achieve, because we've been through all the steps of the process and understanding that their outcomes and their objectives at a deep level. Not a surface level RFP, one paragraph, but we've sat down in a boardroom with them and had the conversation. So the equipment's secondary at that point. Mm-hmm. They don't really care. Now, when a producer comes in and they're a technical producer and it matters to them, we identify that. And they come back to us and they say, hey, I need to know that it's a Barco product because I only work with Barco, or DP doesn't line up with what we have in the other cities that we're using other providers with, perhaps. So you need to understand that customer, why they're asking that question, and be bold enough to go back to them and question what they're coming to you with, not just being old Gil going, hey, the customer's always right. Because often the customer, we're learning now, often the customer is more confused than anything about what the reality is.
Let me ask a question to the room. How many people are still line iteming for all their clients, for all their events? Is anybody working under got one, the rest of you are lying, so, okay.
Yeah.
Tom, you work with a lot of clients, and I know you've...
You lying.
Does that seem about right, what you just saw there?
Yeah, it's like the bar talk. How's business going? Yeah, the business is going great. I'm firing my people. So there's still a lot of line item stuff going out there. And again, a lot of this is fear-based. We can't always have the conversation what we want to have with clients. But a lot of times they don't want to have it either, because they are commodity buyers and there's not a dang thing we can do about it. So I think you have to be a little bit flexible and realistic about how you're going to present something to a customer. But then what is a line item? And that's where things get interesting.
But don't all of you find that when you give people a shopping list, they will shop?
Yep.
And you're just kind of asking for people to try to commoditize your RFQ response by giving them an actual shopping list. So I think it's something that, other than True and I, when we're subrenting, everybody else in this room should not do that.
Anthony, this is for you. On the co-creation with our clients, my ears perked up when you said, with a fee.
Yeah.
So talk to us about how much or what structure of fee you've been having success with.
And the challenge is it's a sliding scale, right? The fee for a boardroom meeting for 50 people, that might be really important, is going to be different than a 15,000 delegate conference in a convention center. So we did a lot of analysis of the Canadian market, and we looked at what producers were charging for design fees along those lines, and we applied some of those. And we're still very much in pilot stage in understanding what we can charge. The main thing is we always put a charge there of some type. And a lot of especially the in-depth design consultation when we're applying our design methodology that we've adopted, that starts at, we don't even sit down in the room if there isn't $6,000 on the order to apply to that co-creation pre-event planning. For design. And we haven't had as much pushback as we thought we would get from that. We thought we'd get you're doing our job, why are you charging us to take our job? It's been the opposite. They're like, hey, we need something. We need some help in articulating our value as the planner. And you're teaching us this method and this methodology, so we want to learn this, and then they take that away. So for that $6,000, $12,000, $20,000, once again, sliding scale, they learn how to do it, and then the next year, they don't need to engage us to such a level because they come to us with that narrative that we create in year one. They iteratively revise that narrative, and instead of coming back to us with that line item, they're coming back to us and saying, we need to affect this behavior change. They're entering the event feeling, saying, doing these things. We want them exiting, saying, feeling, doing these things. What technologies do you have that can empower that behavior change? And so they don't need to then spend that money. There's probably still a consultancy fee, but we're not applying as much time to it, so that scale can slide down once again. But the number one thing is there's always a fee on the order, and we express the value that they get from that, and they come back to us and say, we got it.
Is it more common you do a flat fee, or do you sometimes charge a percentage of overall project revenue?
We're still playing with that, but flat fee has had the least amount of pushback. And it's that usual thing, what's your budget? And when you say it's going to be a percentage and they don't know what the budget's going to be, it confuses them more, and we want to make it simple for them to embrace this new way of engagement rather than complicate it for them.
Yep.
What do we call it?
Yeah, what's the
So
design? I mean, yeah.
And what's the line item?
So the first step that we did to bring experience architecture and experience design into our organization was develop a small but mighty team as a pilot. And we picked the people within our organization who were already thinking this way, who already had those kinds of relationships with the customer, because that was a quick win for us. And we put us together and we came up with the idea of a design hub, because we are a centralized group within our organization that touches multiple facets of the organization and brings them together to connect them better with the customer. So we did that, and then we created an experience architect, and we started looking at experience design, started training the rest of our team on what experience design is and why it's important for us as AV companies. And so we have Design Hub, Design Consultation.
And Adam, I suggest that for all of the above to do as intended, $6,000.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. One line item, $6,000. Yeah.
I have a question for Chantel. So we talked about investing in our equipment and investing in our relationship with our clients. We all use a lot of independent contractors, and we want to be able to invest in them. How can we safely do that to support the culture that we've got in our organizations without putting us at risk for blowing the line on that employee relationship?
The simple response is you really don't. The more you invest in independent contractors, the more of an appearance of an employee relationship you're going to have. Now, if you want to convert those people to employees, or if you want to have temporary employees, that's something to consider. Like I said, it's all going to come down to control and maybe the type of investment you want to make in them. But if it's providing equipment, if it's providing training, those are all going to be indicators of an employment relationship.
That's what we all wanted to hear, I'm sure. With
I
that, too.
know.
But let me ask a question to that. We're seeing contractors who are forming small corporations, LLCs. Does that impact the relationship at that point, or is it the same thing that we're putting ourselves at risk?
Okay, I know Halloween just passed, and I sound like really scary and doom and gloom.
But we knew that was going to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the job of a lawyer, right? It can impact the analysis, but it doesn't insulate you from liability. If an individual has formed their own LLC, one of the factors that is considered often is whether or not the individual has a right to subcontract or has an exclusive relationship with you. And so to the extent that you're using them part-time here and there, you're going to fare a lot better in trying to prove up an independent contractor relationship. But if they're somebody who is dedicated to you and you rely on them year in and year out and they have a very specific team, what can happen, and you have to be careful of this, is that you are creating then a joint employment relationship between, say, a subcontractor for your independent contractor and your business.
Yeah.
There's a bar later.
This is a support group more than it is a panel discussion. Go ahead.
So, I have a question for all of you, actually. But it was encouraging to listen to Anthony saying, you know, you're encouraging your customers to actually learn. You're involved in the process of the design, etc. My feeling on the rental business is that you guys sell, your customers don't buy. And one of my challenges, I'm a trade show organizer. I do the Europe, some of you know me, I do a AVEC show in Europe. Part of our attendee acquisition is not, you guys turn up anyway. We don't have to fight to get you there. But we feel that the event agencies, the guys who have actually got the customers and come to you about equipment, don't have so much knowledge. And they come to you and say, we're going to do this. And you say, well, we recommend this, this, and this, and we'll supply all of that. I think they need more knowledge to know what's available in this industry. And if they have more knowledge, then you can do more business, because they may come to you with something and say, can we do this, can we do that? Am I alienating you by saying they have to be in a buying position rather than being sold to?
So do they really understand what we're offering and what our value proposition is to you?
Exactly.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so I would say, Mike, I mean, I would agree with you, except that the need that you're indicating says that we do a really bad job of meeting their needs. Therefore, they have to educate themselves about what we do so they can ask the right way. So what we need to do a better job is understanding what they're trying to accomplish and selling into the need that they have, rather than saying, here's how we're going to do it, and try and get it to align with their understanding, because they're never going to understand it the way that we understand it. So I think, you know, you're touching on a symptom that we have, is that we're really bad at talking to customers, and we need to get better at it.
I think that customer education has to come from a neutral party also, because if you are, you know, Joe's staging company and you have a spider system and you mortgaged your house to buy that spider system, you are teaching them that everything that spider does is what they want in their show. Right? Yeah, they're not being exposed to what some of the other, like products would do, or what your particular LED is or anything. So I do think a lot of that needs to come from associations like AVEC and people that are neutral, and not even us. I mean, we're neutral in a lot of different ways, but we still like to sell what we have in our inventory as well.
Well, we all do, right?
Yeah. So,
yeah, because apparently we need uplights and drapes.
You are not going to educate. You're not going to teach your customer to like what your competitor owns.
Right.
You're just not going to do that. So I think it's unrealistic to expect everybody to train clients at large on technology in general, and it's up to people like AVEC and different associations to get that education and that information out to them.
We have another question over here.
I have a question for Tom. KPI question. So
Yum.
I appreciate that KPIs tend to measure what, like you say, what the business was designed to do, or what I would call a lagging indicator. Shows us what we have accomplished.
Right.
And I like your idea that questions, what did you say, good questions, well answered, or something like that? Provide
ask ourselves better questions.
Yeah, decreases our fear and makes us more successful eventually. My question is, and I know you said you weren't going to give us many examples, but for those people in this room who maybe struggle with what a leading indicator KPI might be, you got any commentary on that? What kind of leading indicator KPI should we measure? Because gross revenue certainly isn't it.
Yeah.
Well, so you can take that's a great question. So you can take any KPI and extrapolate what it's leading to, and that makes it a leading indicator. So sub-rentals is a leading indicator of my CapEx need, right? Now, if I don't buy CapEx, then I didn't listen to the indicator, which means my sub-rentals keep going up as a percentage of revenue to a point where it is no longer healthy for me. So anything can be a leading indicator if you act on it. And my biggest frustration with folks that I work with is that they have all these KPIs, but they're not actionable. They go, oh, that's unfortunate. And then then we go to, oh, but we got
That's
another
bad.
meeting. Yeah. So it's got to be, if we're going to track it, then we have to know what happens if it goes up, if it goes down, what's the reaction? And so that's what I'm always looking for. So if this is important, tell me what's going to happen if it goes up. Tell me what's going to happen if it's going to go down. And if I've got a good answer for both of those, then we should track it because now it's actionable. Does that help? Okay.
There's another question back here, wasn't there? Did I miss that? No?
I wanted to kind of respond to Don and Chantal as well that you're right. You can't train your subcontractors, right? I mean, basically that's what you're saying, but we can, and and so can Evolve, and so can other people. So I think there is. We're going to train 1,000 freelancers and technicians and stuff this year with a little program we have. That's 1,000 out of probably 1 million people that need to be trained. But there are some ways for you to invest in them without actually investing your money. So I think it's important to find ways where other people that I will never hire these guys. They will never work for me independently or otherwise. Union techs, freelancers. We're touching them because I think that overall trained people that know how to utilize the equipment and give a good experience benefit everybody in the industry.
Well, and to follow up on that, I think the best way to get them to have the experience, training, knowledge that you want them to is to have that requirement for whoever you're using then to provide that talent to you. So if you want specific knowledge about a product, experience, model, whatever it might be, just make that the requirement. Then it is on your contractor to train their subcontractors on that business so that they can continue to work with you.
I had a client the other day say, we'll run LED from you, but you have to train my technicians and my freelancers.
So my question comes back to that same point about the training. And we've got a host of people here today that can come into our shops and set up training and let all of us learn from that. And so by inviting our freelancers in the area to come in and get that knowledge, are we co-joined with them?
You're not instantly going to make them an employee. You don't want to make that training mandatory. If you want to charge them a cost to do it, it helps you because ultimately you want them to be investing more in their business than you are. Because what it's going to come down to is skill and initiative, profit, ability to profit or loss, and an overall investment in their business. And so if you're making the most financial investment into the business and they're just showing up and they're getting free training and using your materials and then you're paying them after the fact, they're not going to look like independent contractors.
But the question I'm saying is we have a sponsor, Digital Projection, comes in and shows us how to operate these pieces of gear. And so we open that up to those people.
Let Digital Projection invite them.
Yeah, we can't charge them, right?
You're just
Well, it's in our
providing the
shop.
location.
It's
Yeah,
almost,
you're
you're
providing the
talking
location.
physical location.
Yeah.
If it's at your
Right.
shop, does that impact it then?
Yes, just don't make it mandatory. Just don't make it mandatory. You can say this training is being provided by X. If you want to show up, great. You're not going to take roll. You're not going to penalize somebody if they don't. You're not going to bonus them if they do. It's just this is training that's being provided. Now you may on the back end decide to use someone that attended the training because now they know how to use that product or that device, machinery, whatever. But at the same time, you're not going to make it mandatory and pay for their time to be there. It's just at the end of the day, you don't want to be the one carrying the financial weight of their business if what they're really trying to hold themselves out as and what you want them to be is an independent business operator. Really is what an independent contractor is going to be. They're filing self-employment taxes. You're 1099ing them. You're not treating them like an employee. And so any factor related to controlling them is just going to weigh against you.
So I unfortunately have this ugly clock here because I know we could talk for a while, but I did want to close with this, a question for each of you, all in your distinctive areas that you've spoken to today. What is the biggest trend you're seeing for the next 12 months coming up in 2020 that you're seeing in your different areas? We'll start with employment law first.
Biggest trend?
Yeah.
Independent contractor classification.
Yeah.
And what
I set her up for that one.
No, right? No, but it happens industry-wide. And so when you have a practice of people just typically being treated like independent contractors and there hasn't been an analysis really done as to why they've been classified as independent contractors, you see plaintiffs' attorneys on the employment side trying to bring large collective actions on groups of people saying that they've that they've just been misclassified and entitled to overtime. I've seen it in the like real estate agent, insurance agent, now exotic dancers, entertainers. And if in this industry the practice is to treat certain individuals as independent contractors, you can expect that to be challenged. And so the best way I want to say to get ahead of that, because I don't want to be all gloom, is to engage counsel to do a classification audit. I mean, it's going to be business specific, it's going to be individual specific. So at least you have somebody looking at the responsibilities and give you just, put some eyes onto why those people have actually been classified and make sure it's correct.
We're gonna have to go rapid fire here a little bit. It keeps blinking now at me. So
Does that mean it's broken?
True, that's your red light.
I'll take 5 more, please. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The trend I'm seeing, and this will sound fluffy, but data-driven iterative design. So I'm seeing a lot of clients coming to me now saying if we activate a technology, no matter what it is, whether it's engagement, immersion, or just an environment treatment, they're asking us, how are you going to prove to me that it worked? How are you going to give me analytics and data that I can then take back to my stakeholders and say, hey, lucky we had Concise's app because we had this level of engagement with it. And that then they're going to use that data in the future to iteratively improve the experience at their event and make different choices, whether it's different products or to scrap products, throw them away and not reactivate them in the following years. So anybody who can provide that data to that client base, I think is going to be
data's everywhere, right?
It's going to be in a position of power, yeah.
True. How about yourself?
We're going to focus a lot on technicians and training in 2020. Selling equipment's not that hard. The manufacturers are going to drive that through new technology, and they're going to create demand that we would benefit from. Renting equipment, we're more on the follow the demand side, and we follow what the industry is doing when we rent equipment. But our education and our academy, we are going to focus on trying to attract younger talent. We're going to align with high schools and colleges that have multimedia programs in place and try to connect them a little better. And we're going to start a specialized course called LEVT, which is Live Event Video Technician, and we're going to market that to veterans. And we're trying to bring in new talent because we feel like the technician part of our industry, which we're all dependent on, is aging. And the more we can make this an attractive industry to kids coming out of high school that may not have an appetite for college but may want to be technical. E-gamers is a great, we've got a lot of people we've hired out of the e-gaming type industry that have come into our warehouses and really had a zeal for learning the technology. And some of them turn into superstars out of nowhere, So we're going to try to cultivate young talent and bring them into our industry.
Always a demand for people, right?
Absolutely. It's not going to change.
Tom, how about you?
The trend is that everybody's raising their labor rates, which is good because you're finally realizing what your costs are, which is all the more reason you need to start W-2ing these people and get over this silly argument about why you're not doing it because it's a really bad business decision. End of story.
I'm hearing an employment theme, but anyways, Jane, why don't you close this out?
Well, we too are focusing on education, definitely trying to train our customers, technicians, focus on quality. I think it's really easy to be seen as a commodity when you do what we do, where all we do is rent you boxes and then you give them back. But we're trying to put the service back into that and the quality back into that. And then obviously what we're all seeing a lot of is industry consolidation. So we're keeping a very good eye on the people that have consolidated and become the big ones, but we are also paying extra special attention to what we see as being the up-and-comers because people want choices. They will always want choices, and I think we're going to see some new medium-sized companies in 2020.